Hey everybody, it's me, AJ Golden, self-proclaimed money nerd and personal finance geek, and welcome to Personal Finance Made Easy. I created this channel to help you win with money by making concepts such as budgeting, saving, and investing simple and easy. Today, we are going to analyze some rental real estate. I am excited to share with you my strategy for looking at rental real estate properties to determine whether or not I want to invest in them. We'll use the calculations that we learned last week in this video to determine if a property is worth doing further analysis. And who knows, we may even find properties for you and I to invest in. Well, I don't know, maybe you'll invest in them or I'll invest in them. I don't know, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to find properties that will be good rental real estate properties to invest in. But before we do that, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you like this video, take a moment to hit that like button below. I'm gonna stop with all the other stuff and jump on over to the computer and let's look at some property so that we can build your future income. All right, so the way that I like to analyze property is I will first use the first two rules of thumb that we talked about in last week's video. And those two rules of thumb are the 1% rule, where you take the monthly rental income divided by the purchase price to determine if you will have more than 1%, and that will let me know that I can invest in this property or I can investigate the property a lot more. The other rule is the 50% rule, where you take half of the monthly rental income, and that will give you an idea of what your potential operating expenses are. And I talked about these more in last week's video. You can take a look at the video there. I can usually do these two rules of thumb pretty quickly using a, calculating them in my mind or by, jotting them down on a quick piece of paper. You can really calculate those two rules of thumb pretty quickly. But I have included it in this spreadsheet so that you can get an idea for how to see it being calculated for an analysis that I'm doing. So first thing I want to do, let's take a look and find a property. So the way that I find property, I actually get email listings from former realtors that I've used before in the past, or I'll go to Zillow. I get emails from Zillow around properties that I'm already invested in that help me to see other properties that have gone for sale in those areas. So this is one of those examples. This property happened to have just gone on sale 6 days ago. It's near a property that I've purchased and I talked about in my last video, and it looks like it's for a pretty good price. So I'm going to open this property up. I'm going to open this property up in Zillow, and I'm going to take a look at that property. First off, I can see pretty easily that the asking price for the property is $60,000. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house being sold in the Ohio area. I'm going to scroll down here because the first thing that I want to look at, as I mentioned a moment ago, based on the rule of thumb, is the rental estimate. They call it the rental zestimate in Zillow. But let's take a look down here, and I can find the rental zestimate, which is listed here. Now, this one happens to be the estimated rent that this house can bring in is similar to the property I talked about last week, which is $950 a month. You divide that in half, you get $475. Pretty easily, that will let you know that it's about the same as what I had with my last property. But let's take a look at it and put these numbers into our spreadsheet. I'm not really concerned at this point about the details of the property. I'm really wanting to see if it's worth investigating further. So I'm going to take these two figures, the $950 a month and the $60,000, and I'm going to drop that in my spreadsheet. $950 a month is the potential gross rental income. The asking price is $60,000. Now, you'll see I have a few things that are being pre-populated in the spreadsheet. First off, I've given kind of a percentage for the closing costs. These closing costs will vary, but this helps me to see at a glance what the potential acquisition cost or the cost that it would take for me to purchase this house is just by looking at this cell. Now, I've already gone ahead with my formulas here and calculated the 1% rule. As I mentioned a moment ago, it is the monthly rental income divided by the total acquisition cost, which this one meets the 1% rule. Let's say, for instance, it doesn't meet the 1% rule, that they were asking, say, $100,000 for this one. Then you would see in my spreadsheet that it's less than 1%. It turns red. I know I don't want to even investigate this one any further. But this one happens to meet the 1% rule. If I put my 60,000 back in, we see it's at 1.54. As I mentioned in last week's video, my threshold for me to investigate further is 1.5%. So this is definitely a property that I'm interested in looking into further. So I'm going to go ahead and look more in depth into this. And the way that I do that is I continue on this side of the spreadsheet to determine, are there any potential rehab costs that I may encounter? Now, if I go back to the property, what I can tell here is now I want to go and start to look. I'm scrolling up and I want to look more at the details of the property now. Now, if you see this, it says pretty straightforward. This property needs lots of work. So I don't know what that means at this moment. So at this point in time, I'm pretty much going to have to estimate what I think it will cost to get this property rent ready. I have a little bit of history in this area. Obviously, I own another home here. I own several homes in this area. And I know, or I'm going to estimate without looking at it or without knowing anything about this, I'm going to estimate that it would cost me about $15,000 to make sure that I repair the property and it's ready to rent. So the rest of this spreadsheet indicates that I'm going to be putting a down payment on this house, and generally when you are purchasing investment real estate, you have to put a down payment of 25%. The bank wants you to have an invested interest. We'll talk about in a future video some strategies that you can take in order to invest with little or no money down. But for today, we just want to analyze the property and determine if this is worth us pursuing or looking into further. So with a 25% down payment on this $60,000 property, I'm going to end up putting $15,000 down. With $15,000 of rehab costs, I'm going to ultimately end up paying about $30,000 in order to acquire the property. That's how much cash I'm going to have to put into the property in order to purchase it. If I get a $15,000 down payment, $15,000 to repair the property, and the rest I will finance, which would end up being about $46,000 in this particular example. Now, I'll talk about the financing here in a moment, but I also want to share with you one of the other things that I look at before I go any deeper in analyzing the property. And I want to see what kind of area this property is in. So you noticed in Zillow, I was able to find the property itself. If I copy the address here, which I've already done, and I flip over to another real estate site called Trulia, I use Trulia in order to determine what the area is like. You know, if it's a good area or if it's a rough area, to be quite honest. I can see that using Trulia. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'll show you exactly what you need to do. So you simply search for your property, and they have this section here called crime. So I like to pop open that crime area, and you'll notice here, actually I'm going to go back first. So you'll notice at first glance, it shows right here on the crime section that this area has the lowest crime relative to the rest of Cuyahoga County. So I think that this is obviously a great place to invest in. Again, I've already done some of this analysis before because I have a property that's very close to this particular property. So if I open this up though, and I want to give you an idea for what to look for when you're actually investing a property of your own. So here you'll see this colored area, and I'll zoom out here in a moment, but before I do, I want to show you the lighter color indicates that this is the lowest crime area. The darker the color gets, that means it's the higher crime area. So if I zoom out so that you can see some other areas within this city, you'll start to notice that here are the higher crime areas. All of this area is this very light color. So that lets you know that this area is the lowest in crime. And these other areas, you know, have some, you can see there's some very dark colors here. That lets you know that that's a higher crime area. Now you may be noticing that it shows you kind of the police reports here, or the reported crime in this particular area. And you may see some of these things like the assault, the vandalism, burglary, things like that, and get a bit nervous because you see that there is crime in this area, even though it's a lower crime area. Well, I would not let this discourage you, because you can pull up your own neighborhood. I pulled up my own neighborhood before, and you'd be surprised how much crime is actually in the areas near you or around you. You know, it's tough to find an area that has zero crime. You know, somewhere there's going to be crime pretty much everywhere you look. But this is a low crime area, and in the several years that I've owned my other property in this area, I've not had any issues from a crime standpoint. But this is one of the things that I like to look at when I'm investing in a new area or an area that I'm unfamiliar with, is I take a look at this. You can also look at the things like the commute time, the schools, to understand if it's got a nice school district or not. But I wouldn't let that also deter you from investing in a particular area, because you may be investing with someone, or your tenants may not even have school-aged children and they don't care about the schools. It basically depends on what your investment strategy is, on who you are trying to market to, who you want to look for, and what types of areas you want to look in. So that is your own marketing or your own investment strategy. And we'll talk about that also in a different video. We'll talk about your investment strategy. So I'm going to finish here, and I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet. This sheet lets me know, or that site lets me know, that this is an area that I would like to invest in. So let's analyze the property a little further. So I mentioned that I'm going to actually have a loan on this property. So if I have a loan, I need to try to determine the interest rate. I happen to know that the interest rate that I normally get as an investment property is between 5 and 6%. So I'm going to go ahead and put 5% for this interest rate. I get 30-year fixed mortgages. So I'm going to put 30 years, and this spreadsheet will give me my calculated mortgage total. If you don't have a spreadsheet like this, I'm going to tell you how you can get it. If you don't have a spreadsheet like this, then you can go to a site like bankrate.com and put in the details of your potential mortgage, and it will give you also this same mortgage calculation. So the next thing I want to do, I'm going to skip these calculation areas for the time being, even though these are the things that we talked about in that previous video. But I'm going to go over and continue doing my property analysis, because this is a property that I'm interested in learning more about. I want to go ahead and look at the details, the operating expenses for this property. Now, you'll notice I've outlined the common operating expenses, and I've left a couple of spaces for anything else that you may have or that you may encounter when you're investigating your property. In this particular case, I want to find the property taxes. You can find that on Zillow. If I scroll down to the bottom of the Zillow section here, you'll see a section that says property taxes. So for last year, 2019, the property taxes on this particular property were $1,742. So I'm going to go ahead and put that $1,742 in the annual section, it's going to break it down to a monthly amount. And then I want to put in the insurance. The insurance, again, I happen to know it's around $750 a year. You can also shop around. You can work with an insurance broker to try to understand what insurance rates are for the types of properties that you want to have, and you can get a general sense for how much that insurance is. The actual property insurance may be a little lower, maybe a bit higher. This is just to help us with that initial investigation for this property. Now, the rest of these items, we want to put a percentage in, and let me explain. So for repairs and maintenance, we already said here that we're going to rehab the property. We're going to fix the property up so that it'll be ready to rent out. So repairs and maintenance, you have to make an educated decision here, or an educated guess here, on what you want to set aside so that if any other repairs come up, you'll have enough money to take care of those repairs. And so what I'm saying here to set aside is that we will actually end up setting aside, I'm going to go for the lowest, and I have some percentage suggestions here of 5% every month. So out of my monthly payment, I'm going to set aside 5% so that if a repair comes up, I have the money already set aside to be able to take care of that repair. The next one is a vacancy. You're going to have times in your property rental history that you're in between tenants, and that means that you'll have vacancy. So you have to account for the vacancy that you think you'll have. Now, again, I have some experience here. You may have to take an educated guess, but I have some experience here, and I know that my vacancy is about 5% as well. You can also work with a property manager in that location or a realtor in that location to try to determine how the vacancy, what the vacancy rate is for the area in which you're searching for. Capital expenditures. Those are high cost expenditures, things like repairing a roof or updating a furnace or a water heater, something like that. That's a one-time kind of a high value item. You want to set aside money to be able to take care of those things when they come up. Again, I'm putting a lot of money in at the beginning to fix it up. So I'm going to put my capital expenditures at a relatively low percentage that I'm setting aside each month. And then management fees. I use property managers. If you are purchasing a home that will be near you and you want to manage the property yourself, then you may have a lower amount here or no amount here. I would suggest always analyzing the property with property management included so that you can make sure that the numbers work if you decide to hire a property manager in the future. So I'm going to put in 10% because that's how much my property management is. Now these other areas, electricity, gas, water, sewer, HOA, garbage, lawn care, you have to understand if your property requires it. I have some duplexes where I'm required to pay like for water and sewer and garbage. You may not have to do that if you have a single family residence. This happens to be a single family residence. So I know that once the tenant is in the property, they're responsible for all of these items. Now I may have to pay for some of that while it's vacant, but that's why I have this vacancy amount. So I'm going to leave these blank for the moment. And what we'll see here are these are my monthly expenses. So just like I mentioned when we were talking about the 50% rule, if you take approximately 50% of the monthly rent, that is an estimate of what your expenses would be. So let's take a look at how that really plays out. If we notice our expenses that we've analyzed here are $445. If we look at our 50% rule, we estimated that they would be around $475. So it shows that that is proof that it is correct. Once we look at this, we want to see what our net operating income is. We can see that by, as we mentioned in the last video, taking the monthly rental income, subtracting the total operating expenses, which will give us a net operating income of $504. Our cash flow would end up being $255 per month. That is our net operating income minus our debt service. Remember, we've got a mortgage on this, so we have to subtract out the cost of our mortgage each month. That will give me a cash flow of $255. I happen to like that cash flow. That's the type of cash flow I look for whenever I am investing in property. If it's got, this is my own investment strategy, if it's got $150 or more, then this is a property that I would be interested in investing in. And then my cash on cash return is the annual cash flow, this multiplied times 12, divided into how much I paid for the property. Remember, I had to pay a $15,000 down payment and $15,000 in repair costs. I put out a total of $30,000. So this property would give me a 10% cash on cash return. So it's a 10% return on my investment, which I think is a pretty good deal. So all in all, this is a property that I would seriously consider investing in. Now, there are some things that I would do because the house does need work. I would probably negotiate down this $60,000. I'd probably say, I would probably come in with an offer of, let's say, $45,000. And I'd have to look at the property itself and try to determine, not look at it personally, but have an inspector go out and look at the property to determine if this is worth my investment. But I probably offer something like $45,000, maybe $50,000. It depends on the property itself. When I adjust that, it of course adjusts my down payment, and my cash on cash return would go up. My cash flow would go up. So I'm highly motivated to try to convince the seller to sell me this property at a discounted price, which would definitely make this an even better investment. The other thing that may fluctuate is the amount of rehab. Now, this could go either down or it could go up. I may end up having to put more money into the rehab. These are things that I would find out once I have an inspector go through and inspect the house and determine if that house is something that I'm willing to invest in. So this is how I would investigate a property or analyze a property to determine if it's something that I'm willing to invest in. I hope this has been helpful for you. I want to provide this spreadsheet to you so that you can investigate and analyze your own properties. And the way I'd like to do that is if you go to the description down below, in that description, I will share with you my Facebook group. Put down in the comments, let me know that you've subscribed. Go over to the Facebook group, join the Facebook group, send me a DM, and I'll send you this spreadsheet so that you will have the same tool that I have to be able to investigate your property. Well, that's all I got for you today. I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that you were able to see how to invest in rental real estate. I hope that you were able to find a property that will fit you. Why don't you just take a moment and go and review some properties on your own? You are going to have to look at hundreds of properties before you can narrow it down to the ones in which you really want to be able to put an offer in on and then potentially purchase. So I'm hoping that you found a property or you got an understanding of how to investigate property and analyze properties so that you can hopefully put some offers in and invest in real estate yourself. Until next time, you keep living on purpose, pursue your passion, and get the gold.